On Thanksgiving evening, before 30 relatives, when my husband repeated for the 19th time his regret over marrying me, I calmly untied my apron, then grabbed the papers and dragged him straight to the county courthouse to file for divorce. He dared me, saying whoever didn't sign the divorce papers that night was a coward. My mother-in-law encouraged her son to sign. The next day, his family would call me 59 times, begging me to let them off the hook. It was Thanksgiving evening. Outside, the streets of Chicago were bustling with the festive air of the holiday, the early sound of distant music, the honking of cars as people rushed home for their family reunions. But inside our sprawling 1,500-square-foot luxury condo, the atmosphere was suffocating, almost unbreathable. It was thick with the smell of greasy food, mingling with the scent of cheap cigarette smoke and the overpowering perfume of relatives who had driven up from their small town downstate. 30 people, exactly 30 of my husband's relatives, from aunts and uncles to distant cousins I couldn't even name, were crammed into our living room. The sound of booming laughter, clinking glasses, and the shrieks of children fighting over a tablet created a chaotic symphony. Ironically, I was the only one who felt like an outsider in my own home, a property legally in my name. I stood in the kitchen, my back soaked with sweat, my hands red and raw from rinsing vegetables in cold water since dawn. 5 years of being Ethan's wife, 5 Thanksgivings, and I had never once sat down to eat a proper meal, never watched the entirety of It's a Wonderful Life. I had been a respected financial director, a force to be reckoned with at the negotiating table, yet here I was, confined to a cramped kitchen, spinning like a top to serve my husband's fragile ego. From the living room, Ethan's voice boomed, clearly audible through the thin glass door. He told everyone to eat and drink their fill, that his house might lack a few things, but it never lacked money or booze. He added that his wife was a bit slow, but the food was a feast worthy of a 5-star restaurant. I gave a bitter smile, wiping a bead of sweat from my cheek, the salty taste touching my tongue. A feast? It was a heritage turkey I had to ask my mother to special order from a farm in Vermont. It was the morel mushrooms my father had spent a month drying in the sun. It was the savings I had scraped together, dollar by dollar. I carried the heavy pot of steaming turkey soup, infused with herbs, out of the kitchen. As I placed it on the banquet table, the hot steam fogged up my glasses. Before I could even let out a sigh of relief, Ethan's sharp voice cut through the air like a knife. He asked what was taking me so long, Olivia. Just 1 pot of soup, and I kept the whole family waiting. He called me useless. He said knowing this, he would have been better off staying single. He regretted ever marrying me. The noisy room fell silent. 30 pairs of eyes turned to me. Some held pity, but most were filled with smug amusement. This was the 19th time. I remembered it clearly, because the memory of a finance professional never forgets numbers. The 19th time Ethan had said he regretted marrying me in front of a crowd. Previous times might have been because I bought the wrong brand of dress shirt he liked, because I accidentally broke a decorative gourd on his mother's birthday, or simply because I told him to take a shower while he was engrossed in a video game. The 18 times before, I had chosen to bow my head and swallow my tears. I would mumble an apology to keep the peace, to save face for the man I once loved with all my heart. But today, on this sacred evening that marked a time of gratitude and togetherness, when people's hearts are supposed to turn toward forgiveness and love, his words were the final drop that caused the dam of my endurance to break. I looked at Ethan, his face flushed with alcohol, his eyes clouded with contempt. Beside him, his mother, Brenda, sat cracking pumpkin seeds. She spat the shells onto the hardwood floor I had just polished, pursing her lips as she chimed in. For goodness sake, a freeloader and slow as a turtle. My son wasn't wrong, so why the long face? A woman who doesn't know her place, making things gloomy on a holiday. His cousin Tiffany, sitting next to him, giggled into her hand, whispering loudly to the other cousins that my sister-in-law had it too good, getting a free ride from Ethan and still copping an attitude. Humiliation rose in my throat, hot and bitter. I looked at the feast I had poured my heart into, at the faces eagerly awaiting more drama, and then I looked at myself, a 30-year-old woman, hair a mess, wearing a faded sweatsuit, my hands smelling of garlic and onions. Suddenly, I found myself ridiculous. Ridiculous for sacrificing my youth and career for people who had no appreciation. Ridiculous for allowing myself to be trampled on to this extent. I took a deep breath, my chest swelling with indignation, yet my mind was clearer than ever. I slowly reached behind my back and untied the knot of the grease-stained apron, the invisible shackle that had bound me for 5 years. Then, to everyone's astonishment, I threw it straight at Ethan's face. Smack! The apron hit him, then fell into the bubbling pot of turkey soup, splashing hot broth onto his pristine white shirt and the fancy dress of his cousin Tiffany. Tiffany's shriek pierced the dead silence. Ethan shot up, his face drained of color, pointing a trembling finger at me, his voice shaking with fury. He asked if I had lost my mind. I looked him straight in the eye, my gaze defiant, no longer holding any fear or submission. I articulated each word, my voice clear and sharp in the large living room. You said you have regrets, so I will grant you your wish. 30 people, 30 faces with a kaleidoscope of expressions from shock and bewilderment to anger were all fixated on me. Ethan, his face splattered with soup and grease, his eyes veined with red, was a picture of wounded pride. The ego of a patriarchal man, slapped in the face by his wife in front of his entire clan, had made him lose all reason. He roared like a wounded animal. He called me a miserable woman and asked if I dared to cause a scene in his house on Thanksgiving. He swore that if he didn't beat me to death today, he wasn't a Thompson. Brenda slammed her hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. She pointed at me, her thin lips curled in a snarl, hissing through her teeth. So, this little witch thinks she can act possessed and be disrespectful to her husband and mother-in-law? What a disgraceful, ungrateful daughter-in-law. The relatives started whispering, the murmurs buzzing like a disturbed beehive. But I didn't back down, nor did I tremble. The moment the apron left my hands, the weak, submissive person inside me died. Now, standing before them was Olivia Morgan, the woman who once managed $100 million funds, a woman with a cool head and a heart that had turned to stone. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket and calmly connected it to the brand new 65-inch smart TV hanging in the living room, the one Ethan proudly paraded as his year-end gift to himself, though it was purchased with my credit card. The screen flickered to life, not with a festive holiday special or saccharine greetings. What assaulted everyone's eyes was an Excel spreadsheet, dense with numbers, presented in a clear, professional format with a blazing red title, 5-Year Family Financial Audit. One of the uncles, wearing thick glasses, squinted and asked in a shaky voice what this was. I held the TV remote, my posture as poised as if I were addressing a board of directors, and spoke clearly. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Since everyone is here today, I would like to report on the financial situation of this family, the one Ethan so proudly proclaims he is the pillar of. I clicked a button, and the numbers danced on the screen, cold and cruel, stripping away the lies. Total living expenses for the past 5 years, $285,600. This amount includes food, utilities, gifts for family events, medical bills, and all the furnishings for this condo. And let me reiterate, all of it was paid from my salary and personal savings, with some help from my own parents. I glanced at Ethan. His face had turned from red to a sickly green. Brenda's mouth hung open, the pumpkin seed in her hand forgotten, falling to the floor. And this, I said, emphasizing my tone, and moved to the next column where a perfectly round number appeared, mockingly, is the contribution from my husband, Ethan Thompson, for the past 5 years. He hasn't given me a single dime for our family. His salary, he claimed, was for investments and networking. I zoomed in on a detailed entry highlighted in red. Hospital bill for mother-in-law's heart surgery last month, $15,000. I turned to look directly at Brenda, my sharp gaze making her flinch and shrink back. Mom, you always go around telling the neighbors how filial your son is, how he paid for your medical treatment. But did you know that I had to borrow that $15,000 from my own parents' retirement fund? My parents, who sell produce at a farmer's market back in their hometown, scrimping and saving every penny, only for their daughter to support her husband's family and still be called a freeloader. The living room was utterly silent. The relatives who had just been jeering at me now stared at the floor, no one daring to utter a word. The naked truth had shattered this family's hollow pride like a soap bubble. But that's not all. I gave a cold smile and clicked again. The screen displayed a list of transactions from Ethan's secondary credit card, the one I foolishly gave him for emergencies. October 15th, purchase of an iPhone 15 Pro Max for his sister Tiffany, $1,200. November 20th, purchase of a designer handbag for his mother, Brenda, $700. And most notably, I paused for a moment, letting the tension build to its peak. A series of money transfers appeared on the screen, with the memo, "For my sweet Angelxo," totaling over $10,000. "Who is sweet Angelxo, Ethan?" I asked, my voice light but laced with menace. "Is she a business partner, or some online fantasy you spend your nights messaging while your wife is breaking her back in the kitchen doing dishes?" Ethan was trembling, sweat pouring down his face as he stammered incoherently. He told me not to slander him, that it was money for charity. Online charity. Charity? I burst out laughing, a bitter, echoing sound. "You take your wife's money to support some girl online and call it charity?" Oh, and I also noticed some very strange, recurring transfers with odd, non-rounded numbers. "Do you want me to also display the messages where you complain about me to your new friend and the shady transactions you've been trying to hide from your company?" My words were a fatal blow that crushed Ethan's feeble resistance. He looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with aggression but with sheer terror. He knew I held not just the financial records, but secrets that could land him in serious trouble. Ethan stood there, his eyes bloodshot, his chest heaving with the humiliation he had just endured in front of his entire family. He let out a savage roar and lunged at me like a cornered beast. He screamed that he would kill me, the miserable woman who dared to disgrace him. I was not shaken. I had anticipated this scenario during long, sleepless nights lying next to my worthless, snoring husband. As Ethan's large hand swung up, poised to deliver a brutal slap, I quickly pulled a small black canister from my jacket pocket. Psh! A stream of potent pepper spray shot directly into his face at close range. He screamed in agony, clutching his face, stumbling backward before collapsing onto the floor. This was the pepper spray Chloe, my lawyer friend, had discreetly given me a month ago with a warning. She had told me to keep it for self-defense, that men with fragile egos like my husband can become violent when cornered. While Ethan writhed and wailed, his eyes burning and his nose streaming, the terrified relatives scrambled away, no one daring to intervene. I calmly walked over to my handbag on the sofa, pulled out an A4 sheet of paper neatly tucked inside a file folder, and threw it down in front of him. "Sign it," I commanded coldly, my voice sharp amidst his groans. "This is a no-fault divorce petition I've already signed. Our shared assets will be split, but this condo and all its valuable contents were paid for with my money. You have nothing to claim." Ethan tried to squint at the paper, but the pain forced his eyes shut again. He managed to muster one last bit of defiance. He told me to dream on, that he wouldn't sign, that he would sue me for assault. I sneered, a smile that didn't reach my eyes, then suddenly bent down and grabbed the collar of his soup-stained shirt. Using all the strength of a woman who had been repressed for 5 years, I dragged him from the middle of the living room toward the front door. "You won't sign?" "Fine," I yelled, my voice drowning out the faint sounds of holiday festivities from outside. "I'll drag you to the police precinct right now to file a report and get a restraining order." "So what if it's Thanksgiving night? The police are on duty 24/7. Let's see how well your mask of respectability holds up then." My strength was surprisingly immense, or perhaps Ethan was so weakened by pain and panic that I could pull him like a sack of garbage. At the door, I shoved him, and he tumbled out into the cold apartment hallway. I stood tall, blocking the doorway, and pointed a finger at his face, making one final, resounding declaration in front of his gawking relatives. "Ethan Thompson, you listen closely. You've said you regret marrying me 19 times. Tonight, I'm making your wish come true. Right here, right now. Whoever doesn't sign this divorce petition is a coward." Those raw but powerful words were the final slap to Ethan's tattered self-esteem. He knew my character. Once I said I would do something, I did it. And he was terrified of this escalating and reaching his company or his clients. With trembling hands, he fumbled for the pen I had tossed on the floor and scrawled his name on the petition. In the dim hallway light, I snatched the document, checked the signature, then turned to the crowd frozen inside my home. My gaze swept over each face, my mother-in-law clutching her chest, feigning a heart attack, my sister-in-law pale as a ghost, and the relatives shuffling nervously, eager to flee. "This condo is in my name, the deed says, Olivia Morgan," I said, my voice eerily calm. "In the next 5 minutes, I want every single one of you out of my home. Anyone who remains will be reported to the police for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Now, get out." They didn't need 5 minutes. The crowd hastily gathered their coats and bags, scrambling out the door like a swarm of bees from a broken hive. No one dared to look back at me. The door slammed shut, returning the apartment to its rightful silence. I leaned against it, slowly sliding down to the cold floor. All my energy seemed to drain away, but my heart felt as light as if a massive weight had been lifted. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. The message was short, but reeked of a threat. It read, "You just stirred up a hornet's nest. You better watch your back if you know what's good for you." The 1st of December, the faint morning light of a new month filtered through the blinds, falling on my bare, makeup-free face. I woke up not to the 4 a.m. alarm I used to set to prepare holiday meals, nor to the demanding calls of my mother-in-law, but naturally, in absolute silence. The spacious condo was quiet. No more blaring TV. No more thudding footsteps of strangers. I walked into the living room and saw the empty sofa, where just last night a crowd had sat, cracking nuts and leaving a mess. A pang of loneliness touched my heart, but strangely, it wasn't sadness, but an astonishing sense of freedom. I brewed myself a hot cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the sparkling, clean kitchen. For the first time in 5 years as a daughter-in-law, I could savor my morning coffee, admiring the blooming orchid on the balcony, without having to rush into the kitchen to serve an entire extended family. Taking a sip of the dark roast, I set the cup down and picked up my phone. It was time for the next step in my plan, cutting off the supply lines. I logged into my banking app, my face a cold, emotionless mask. First, I went to the credit card management section, selected the supplementary cards issued to Ethan Thompson and Tiffany Thompson, and decisively hit the lock card button. These 2 cards, with their generous 5-figure limits, were the sweet nectar they had been draining from me for so long to fund their vices and hollow pride. Next, I navigated to the automatic bill payments. Electricity, water, internet, even the cable TV for my in-laws' house downstate, where the whole clan had retreated last night, had all been paid by me for years. Unsubscribe. I whispered those 2 words as my finger swiped decisively across the screen. From now on, if they wanted to use electricity, watch TV, or browse the internet for their social media charades, they could pay for it themselves. I was no longer their free ATM, available for withdrawals at their convenience. As soon as I finished, my phone began to buzz violently. The screen lit up with a flood of missed calls, the number climbing from 10 to 20, then to 59. All from a familiar number, my mother-in-law. I didn't answer, just watched the screen light up and go dark again. A moment later, a barrage of texts began. Brenda texted me using the most vulgar language she could muster. "You witch. What did you do? Why can't I withdraw money for the kids' presents? Are you trying to cut off our lifeline? Unlock the card right now, or I'll come up there and tear you to pieces." Reading those venomous messages, I didn't feel the anger I expected. Instead, I found it amusing. They still thought they had the right to command me, still saw me as the meek, submissive daughter-in-law of yesterday. I calmly took screenshots of all of Brenda's threatening and abusive messages and saved them in a dedicated folder labeled Evidence. This would be very useful in court during property disputes, or if she dared to cause any more trouble. I put my phone down and finished the last sip of my coffee. The bitterness faded, leaving a sweet aftertaste. This holiday season was a solo affair. No turkey, no stuffing, no fake pleasantries, but it was the most satisfying holiday I had ever experienced. The holiday season passed quickly in the peace I had longed for. When everyone returned to the daily grind after New Year's, my battle with my ex-husband's family entered a new, more ferocious phase, a war of public opinion. Early one morning, as I stepped into my office, I received a text from a distant cousin on my ex-husband's side, one of the few in that family who still had a conscience and occasionally talked to me. She sent me an audio recording with a message. It said, "Olivia, you need to see what's happening. Brenda is spreading terrible rumors about you all over town." I played the recording. Brenda's shrill, piercing voice echoed from what sounded like a local market, mixed with the sounds of haggling. "Oh my God, you ladies have no idea. My family was so unlucky to get a daughter-in-law like her. On Thanksgiving, she kicked her entire family out into the street in the middle of the night so she could bring men home. She thinks, just because she has a little money, she can walk all over her husband and disrespect her mother-in-law. I've put up with her for so long, but she just gets worse." Blood rushed to my face, and my hand tightened around the phone. She dared to twist the truth, to accuse me of infidelity, to cover for her own son's depravity. Truly, a liar's tongue knows no bounds. If I remained silent, her entire town and all our relatives would believe I was a promiscuous, unfilial woman. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Getting angry now would be playing right into their hands. I needed to fight back, not by bickering in a market like her, but with the methods of an educated person. I opened the Thompson family's Facebook group, a group I had previously only used for family announcements or sharing photos of the kids. I hadn't left the group since the incident, just silently observed. I composed a long, articulate message, carefully choosing my words, avoiding any profanity but ensuring maximum impact. To my dear aunts, uncles, and cousins of the Thompson family, this is Olivia. I would like to share some materials with you to clarify the malicious rumors that have been spread about me over the past few days. Whether this daughter-in-law is filial or unfaithful, please listen and see for yourselves. Right below the message, I uploaded the audio file from the Thanksgiving night argument, which clearly captured Ethan's verbal abuse, Brenda's encouragement, and his 19 declarations of regret. Next, I posted a series of screenshots of the bank statements, showing Ethan's donations to Sweet Angelexo and his lavish spending on his mother and sister, while his contribution to the family was zero. I concluded with a powerful statement. The filial daughter-in-law breaks her back working to support her entire husband's family for 5 years, only to be met with humiliation and slander. Meanwhile, Brenda's golden boy takes his wife's money to support girls online. Let everyone's own conscience decide what the truth is. The group chat fell silent. No one replied, but I saw a continuous stream of scene notifications. Just 5 minutes later, I received private messages from several aunts and uncles, the same people who had previously sided with Brenda. They wrote things like, "Oh, is that true, dear? I feel so bad for you, Olivia. We had no idea. Ethan shouldn't have done that. How could he be so foolish over some girl?" The tide had turned. The hard evidence I provided had ripped the mask of righteousness from Brenda and Ethan. In a small town, good news travels fast, but bad news travels even faster. I was certain that by noon, the story of Brenda falsely accusing her daughter-in-law would spread far more quickly than her original rumors. After the holidays, Ethan had to return to the city for work. But this time, he wasn't greeted by a hot meal prepared by his wife or neatly ironed clothes. Instead, he was met with loneliness and hunger. Ethan looked utterly pathetic. He wore the same few old, wrinkled outfits because he didn't know how to use an iron. His face was gaunt and haggard. Accustomed to being pampered by his wife, he was now like a lost, overgrown child, struggling to fend for himself after being cut off. One day at lunch, Ethan invited a few colleagues to a fancy restaurant to show off, planning to use the supplementary credit card I had given him, as usual. He ordered all the expensive dishes, imported wine, and bragged about imaginary business deals. But when the bill came, the tragedy of the fake tycoon truly began. The waiter swiped the card once, and the machine showed an error. He swiped it a second time, and it was declined again. Ethan broke out in a cold sweat, his face flushing as he stammered an explanation to his colleagues. He said the bank system must be down, that his card had a massive credit limit and couldn't possibly be maxed out. He pulled out a second card, with the same result. His colleagues looked at him with a mixture of pity and suspicion. In the end, one of them had to pay the bill to save him from further embarrassment, while Ethan just wanted the ground to swallow him whole. He had no idea that I had permanently frozen all his financial lifelines since the day after Thanksgiving. That afternoon, I had a meeting with Chloe, my close lawyer friend, at a quiet cafe. Chloe placed a thick file on the table, her expression serious, a stark contrast to her usual cheerful demeanor. "Olivia, this situation with your ex-husband isn't just about emotional affairs or being foolish with money," she said, her voice low and mysterious. I frowned, picking up the file. "What do you mean? Does he have a secret child somewhere?" "No, it's much more serious than that," Chloe said, pointing to highlighted transactions in the detailed bank statement she had obtained through her connections. "Look closely. This account that receives the donations, the one named Sweden Jelkso, has very unusual cash flow patterns. Money from Ethan's account is transferred in, then immediately moved out to a series of other anonymous accounts, before finally being funneled back to a shell corporation linked to Ethan's boss." I was stunned, a chill running down my spine. "You mean money laundering?" Chloe nodded, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Exactly. I suspect your ex-husband is either being used or is an active participant in a money laundering scheme for his boss, disguised as online donations. If this comes to light, he won't just lose his job. He'll face serious legal trouble, possibly prison time." I dropped the file, my hand trembling slightly. I hated Ethan and wanted him to pay for his betrayal, but I never imagined he would be so stupid and reckless as to venture down such a criminal path. "So what should I do now?" I asked, my voice filled with confusion. Chloe took my hand reassuringly. "Don't worry. This is your leverage. We'll use this to get him out of your life for good and ensure he can never threaten you again." After I cut off all financial support, the lives of those accustomed to being coddled, like Ethan and his sister Tiffany, spiraled into a real crisis. Tiffany, the precious sister who had been spoiled since birth and knew nothing of hard work, was used to funding her lavish lifestyle with her sister-in-law's credit card. Now that the card was blocked, she was like a fish out of water, floundering in debt and struggling to maintain her fake high society image. I knew Tiffany's character well. Greed and vanity were in her blood. So, I had prepared a trap, a sweet but deadly one, located in the old storage room of the condo, for which I had intentionally not changed the lock. It was an Hermes Birkin bag in a deep orange color, a wedding anniversary gift from Ethan 2 years ago. When he brought it home, he boasted that he had to pull strings with friends to get it from France, claiming it was worth over $50,000. He said it was a symbol of their eternal love and his appreciation for his devoted wife. But ironically, I knew it was a high-quality counterfeit, a superfake bought from a black market for less than $300. I knew, but I stayed silent, storing the bag away to preserve the last shred of his dignity, unwilling to expose his cheap lie. When I moved out, I deliberately left that bag in the closet of the storage room, a place Tiffany often snooped through. Through a part-time cleaner I kept in touch with, I let it slip that I had forgotten a bag worth a fortune at the old condo and hadn't had a chance to go back for it. As expected, the fish took the bait faster than I imagined. I sat in my office, wearing headphones, my eyes glued to my phone screen, which was connected to a hidden camera in the storage room. On the screen, Tiffany was rummaging around, her face giddy with excitement. When she found the iconic orange box hidden behind a pile of old blankets, she immediately made a phone call. The speakerphone was on full blast, every sound captured by the tiny microphone I had sewn into the bag's lining. "Ethan, oh my God, Ethan!" Tiffany's voice chirped excitedly. "I found Olivia's Hermes bag, the one you said cost 50 grand. She's so stupid, leaving something so valuable behind." On the other end, Ethan's voice was hesitant but quickly overcome by greed. You really found it? I thought she took it with her. What are you going to do with it?" "What else?" Tiffany giggled, a grating sound. "I owe some loan sharks $5,000, and the interest is killing me. I'm just going to sell it. You said it's worth 50 grand, so I'll sell it cheap for 30. We can split the money. You're broke too, right?" A brief pause. Then Ethan lowered his voice, but it was clear enough for me to hear his utter depravity. "But, Tiffany, be careful. That bag. It's a fake." I lied to her. Where would I get the money to buy a $50,000 bag? Tiffany paused for a second, then brushed it off. A fake? You told me it was real. Whatever. A top-tier fake looks just like the real thing. Those consignment shops won't be able to tell the difference if we play it cool. I'll just swear it's authentic. We'll figure it out later. The important thing is to get the cash now. I'm desperate. Okay. Ethan relented. Go ahead and sell it, but be careful. When you get the money, send me some. I'm totally broke. I took off my headphones and placed them gently on the desk, a cold smile on my lips. They were not only greedy but also foolish enough to confess to their own fraud. With this recording, combined with the act of selling a counterfeit bag as genuine, Tiffany Thompson had just signed her own conviction. The luxury consignment store was located on the most glamorous street in Chicago's Gold Coast, a haven for the city's elite. Tiffany walked in with the air of a pampered socialite, the orange Birkin swinging from her arm, her chin held high. She had no idea that the store owner was an acquaintance of my friend Chloe, and that I had called ahead to warn them about this special visitor. Tiffany placed the bag on the gleaming glass counter, her tone condescending. She asked the owner to appraise it for her. She claimed her husband bought it for her in France, but she lost the receipt. She guaranteed it was 100% authentic. She said she needed cash fast, so she would let it go for a friendly price of $30,000. The owner, wearing white gloves, carefully picked up the bag. She examined it from every angle, inspecting the stitching, the stamped code inside, then looked up at Tiffany, her gaze sharp. "Are you certain this is genuine?" the owner asked, her voice calm but loaded with implication. "Our policy is very strict. If we discover a counterfeit item that the seller knowingly claims is authentic to commit fraud, we are required to contact the police." Tiffany flinched, sweat beading on her forehead, but greed and desperation made her nod vigorously. "I guarantee it. My husband is a director. He wouldn't buy me a fake. Check it as much as you want. If it's not real, I'll pay you double." The store owner smiled, a smile that sent a chill down Tiffany's spine. She set the bag down and discreetly pressed a button under the counter. Less than 10 minutes later, the automatic glass doors slid open. 2 uniformed police officers walked in, accompanied by an independent appraiser. "Miss Tiffany Thompson, we need you to come with us to the precinct," one of the officers said, his voice firm. "We've received a report of felony fraud involving the sale of high-value counterfeit goods." The color drained from Tiffany's face. Her limbs went weak, and the handbag dropped to the floor with a thud. She stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "Officers, you've made a mistake. This bag is real. My brother bought it for me. My sister-in-law. We'll determine if it's real or fake at the station." The officer cut her off, coldly pulling out a pair of gleaming handcuffs. "Please cooperate. The amount you are asking, $30,000, is well within the range for a felony charge." Tiffany burst into sobs, her cries echoing through the chic store, drawing stares from other customers. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she misdialed several times. "Ethan, help me! The police are arresting me!" "You said the bag was real! Get over here now!" Hearing the word police, Ethan, on the other end, was so terrified he immediately hung up, abandoning his sister to her fate. He knew that if he showed up, with the recording I possessed, he would be charged as an accomplice. I sat in my car parked across the street, watching through the window as Tiffany was escorted to a police car, her face a mess of tears and makeup. A sense of sorrow welled up inside me. I felt no satisfaction, only pity for a life ruined by blind indulgence and boundless greed. Those cold handcuffs didn't just restrain Tiffany's wrists, they marked the end of a young woman's future. It was a steep price for a lesson in character that she should have been taught long ago, instead of being enabled to become a parasite. The news that Tiffany had been arrested for fraud was like a bombshell dropped on the cramped rental apartment of Brenda and her son. The family plunged into chaos. Ethan went into hiding, terrified of being implicated, while Brenda cried nonstop, not out of love for her daughter, but out of fear of losing face and having to pay a hefty sum for Tiffany's bail. In her moment of desperation, Brenda's inner drama queen resurfaced. She knew the only person who could possibly save her shattered family now was me, the former daughter-in-law she had once scorned like dirt, but who possessed significant financial resources. The next morning, my phone rang. It was a distant aunt from their hometown, her voice frantic. "Olivia, you have to come back right away. It's Brenda. She's in the hospital, on her deathbed. She had a heart attack. The doctors say her prognosis is grim. She might not make it through the night. She keeps calling your name, wanting to see you one last time to say her goodbyes." I listened, the pen in my hand pausing mid-stroke. A flicker of hesitation crossed my mind. After all, she was the woman I had called Mom for 5 years, for whom I had served meals and cared for when she was ill. Could she really be gravely sick from the shock of her children's actions? But just then, a text from Chloe arrived like a bucket of ice water, snapping me back to reality. It was a candid photo of Brenda, hands on her hips, arguing fiercely with a fishmonger at a market that very morning, her face red, her mouth moving at full speed, looking anything but like a dying woman. "Don't believe it," Chloe texted. "It's a guilt trip. That old woman is a master actress. She's trying to trick you into coming so she can pressure you into paying for Tiffany's legal fees." I looked at the photo, then out my office window at the gray sky that promised rain. The nascent pity in my heart was extinguished by the harsh truth. They thought I was still the same fool from before, easily manipulated by a few crocodile tears. I took a deep breath and called the aunt back, my voice so calm it was chilling. "Yes, I understand. Please tell the doctors to do their best. I will be there shortly. But let me be clear, I am not coming to hear any last words. I am coming to bid farewell to a toxic relationship." I hung up and turned to Chloe, who was sitting across from me, and smiled. "Get ready. We're going to visit this special patient. But we're not going empty-handed. Call your doctor friend and the 2 police officers in charge of Tiffany's case. Ask them to come with us." Chloe raised an eyebrow, understanding me immediately. "What are you planning? A public unmasking?" "Precisely," I nodded, my eyes determined. "Every performance needs an audience, and more importantly, an impartial panel of judges. Today, I'm going to give her a medical consultation she'll never forget, so she learns just how expensive the price of deceit can be." At the County General Hospital's intensive care unit, the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of monitors. On the stark white bed, Brenda lay with her eyes closed, her breathing shallow, tubes and wires attached to her. Ethan stood by her side, his face a mask of grief, occasionally wiping away a tear. A few aunts and uncles huddled around, sniffling, creating a heart-wrenching scene. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have fallen for this perfect act. The door swung open, and I walked in, not with a fruit basket or an envelope of cash as they expected. Beside me was Chloe, and behind us were a doctor in a white coat with a stern expression and 2 uniformed police officers. The arrival of this peculiar delegation instantly silenced the weeping. Ethan looked up, startled by the sight of the police, his face changing color as he instinctively backed away. Brenda, supposedly at death's door, cautiously cracked open an eye to peek at the newcomers. "Mom," I said, my voice not sad, but as cold as ice. "I heard you were gravely ill and might not make it, so I invited Dr. Evans, a top cardiologist from the city's Heart Institute, to consult on your case. I also invited the officers to be here as witnesses, just in case something happens and we need to draft a will to settle any outstanding debts." Ethan stammered, trying to stop us. He asked what I was doing, that his mother was weak and I shouldn't be causing a disturbance. "Move aside," Dr. Evans said sternly, gently pushing Ethan aside and approaching the bed. He put on his stethoscope, placed it on Brenda's chest, checked her pulse, and examined her pupils. His professional, decisive movements kept Brenda lying perfectly still, not daring to make a sound. After just 2 minutes, Dr. Evans removed his stethoscope, turned to us, and shook his head in disgust, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. "How strange." According to her vital signs, this patient's heart is healthier than a teenager's. Her heartbeat is regular, her blood pressure is stable, and her lungs are clear. I've never seen a dying person with such a rosy complexion and firm muscle tone. Perhaps she's just suffering from an overdose of theatrics. The doctor's words were like a splash of boiling water on the group of actors. Realizing she'd been exposed, Brenda could no longer play dead. She shot up like a spring, forgetting she was supposed to be dying, and pointed a finger at Dr. Evans, shouting, "Who the hell are you, you quack? How dare you say I'm faking it? I really have a heart problem. I'm dying right now." "Oh, I'm so glad you're feeling better, Mom," I said with a cold smile, crossing my arms. "You were on your last breath a moment ago, and now you're yelling your head off. It's a true miracle." At that moment, a police officer stepped forward, his voice firm. "Mrs. Brenda Thompson, we've received a report that you are feigning illness to commit extortion and are causing a public disturbance at this hospital. Your actions are not only unethical but may also constitute a criminal offense. We need you and Mr. Ethan Thompson to come to the station to clarify some details regarding Miss Tiffany Thompson's fraud case." Hearing her daughter's name and the mention of the police station, the color drained from Brenda's face. This time, she truly collapsed onto the bed, not from a heart attack, but from pure terror. I looked at the family one last time, my gaze holding no lingering emotion. The show is over. From now on, don't ever use these pathetic tricks to bother me again. Otherwise, our next meeting will be in a courtroom. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the utter humiliation of those who had sold their souls for money. The hospital room door closed, finally severing the last ties between me and that wretched family. I drove home and stopped in front of the large mirror in my bedroom. The woman in the reflection stared back at me, her eyes deep but resolute. Her skin, now properly cared for, was glowing, and the tailored business suit accentuated her slender figure. Gone was the image of the disheveled housewife reeking of cooking grease. The old Olivia Morgan was dead, or perhaps she had just been dormant, and now she was wide awake. After the family upheaval, I decided to return to the career I had once abandoned. With my experience and abilities, plus a recommendation from Chloe, I quickly landed a position at a major investment fund in the city. The demanding job consumed me, helping me forget the trivialities of the past and rediscover my own worth. Today, my boss called me into his office and handed me a thick dossier. "Olivia, this is a due diligence project for a strategic acquisition of shares in Anson Furniture. I want you to be the audit leader. They're having cash flow problems and want to raise capital, but their numbers look a bit suspicious. I need you to take a close look." I opened the file. The name Anson Furniture leaped out at me, making my heart skip a beat. It was the company where Ethan worked, where he had so often boasted of being the star sales manager. What a small, cruel world. "Yes, sir. You can count on me. I'll get to the bottom of their financials," I said, closing the file with a confident smile. This wasn't personal revenge. It was my job. But if, in the course of my work, I happened to uncover the wrongdoings of an acquaintance, that was simply the price they had to pay for their own dishonesty. At lunchtime, I met up with an old college friend who had just returned from overseas. Leo, my first love, was now a successful architect. Seeing each other after so many years, Leo still had the same warm smile. "You've changed so much," he said, his gaze tender. "You're stronger, sharper, but maybe a little lonelier." His words struck a chord deep inside me. I gave a sad smile, stirring my orange juice. "That's life, Leo. We all have to grow up, to adapt. I'm not that naive girl who believed in fairy tales anymore. But you deserve to be happy, Olivia," Leo said, gently taking my hand. "Don't let the past make you lose faith in love. If you ever need a shoulder to lean on, I'm still here." I gently pulled my hand back, maintaining a respectful distance. "Thank you, Leo. But right now, I just want to focus on my career and myself. I want to stand firmly on my own 2 feet before I think about leaning on anyone else." After parting with Leo, I returned to the office, feeling more grounded. I knew I wasn't alone, but I also understood that true salvation could only come from within. The day of the Anson Furniture audit arrived. I walked into the large conference room with the air of someone holding all the cards, accompanied by my team of professional auditors. On the other side of the table, the leadership of Anson Furniture was already seated, and at the podium, ready to present, was none other than Ethan Thompson. He was wearing an old, ill-fitting suit, slightly wrinkled at the shoulders, probably from his own clumsy attempts at laundry. A faint yellow stain was visible on his shirt collar, a remnant of a life without a wife's care. When the lights dimmed and the projector turned on, Ethan began his presentation. He spoke eloquently about market potential, revenue growth, and picture-perfect numbers he had carefully fabricated. But when the lights came back on and he saw who was sitting in the lead auditor's chair, his face turned as white as a sheet. He stammered, nearly dropping the microphone. "Olivia? No, Miss Morgan." I smiled a cool, professional smile. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I am Olivia Morgan, representing Vena Capital and the lead auditor for this project. Please continue your presentation. We are listening very attentively." Ethan swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. He tried to regain his composure, but his voice was now shaky and uncertain. He knew my capabilities. He knew those fabricated numbers couldn't fool a seasoned CFO like me. Regarding Q4 revenue, he stammered, we saw significant growth by expanding our client network. "Hold on," I interrupted, raising my hand, my voice firm. "Mr. Thompson, according to the financial report I have here, the majority of Q4 revenue came from consulting contracts with 3 newly established subsidiary companies. However, upon cross-referencing, all 3 companies are registered at non-existent addresses, and their legal representatives are all your relatives. How do you explain this?" The room was silent. The Anson leadership team turned to look at Ethan with suspicion. His face was ashen, his hands trembling. That must be a data entry error." "An error?" I sneered, turning another page. "Then what about the marketing expenses, which amount to 30% of your revenue, yet have no valid invoices and were all transferred to personal accounts as cash advances? Are you aware that in accounting, this is a classic sign of embezzlement?" Each of my questions was like a sharp scalpel, peeling back the layers of deceit Ethan had so painstakingly constructed. He stood frozen, his mouth agape, unable to utter a word. He understood that his career, his reputation, everything was crumbling before his very eyes at the hands of the woman he had once dismissed as a freeloader. The meeting ended in a tense and heavy atmosphere. My boss, a decisive man with zero tolerance for dishonesty, stood up and announced the immediate termination of any potential partnership with Anson Furniture. "We cannot invest in a company with such a lack of financial transparency and clear signs of self-dealing among its senior staff," he said, looking directly at Anson's CEO. "I suggest you clean up your own house before you go seeking capital elsewhere." Anson's CEO was red with shame and anger. He turned to Ethan and roared, "Thompson, in my office, now!" I packed up my files and walked out of the conference room, feeling a sense of lightness. I didn't need to do anything more. Ethan's own greed and stupidity had dug his grave. But the story didn't end there. That very afternoon, I sent an anonymous email to Anson Furniture's internal control department, attaching all the evidence of Ethan's embezzlement through fake contracts and the money laundering scheme involving the online streamer that Chloe and I had uncovered. Just 2 hours later, an earthquake hit the Anson office. Company security stormed into Ethan's office, ordering him to pack his belongings and leave immediately. He was fired with the most severe disciplinary action and ordered to repay the entire misappropriated sum, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or the company would press criminal charges. I heard the news from a friend who worked in the same building. She told me it was a huge scene. They dragged him out of the company like a stray dog. He was crying and begging his boss for another chance. Everyone in the office was celebrating, saying it was karma. I just smiled faintly and hung up. Karma? Perhaps, but I knew this was only the beginning of his downfall. Jobless, disgraced, and drowning in debt. And soon, a prison sentence hanging over his head. "Let's see how long you can maintain that fragile ego now, Ethan Thompson." Our divorce hearing was held on a dreary, drizzling day, the gray sky a perfect reflection of our dead marriage. I walked into the courthouse in an elegant black dress, my head held high, with Chloe by my side as my legal counsel. Ethan arrived late, looking disheveled and worn out, with stubble on his face and rumpled clothes. He came alone, no lawyer, no family. His mother, Brenda, after the hospital fiasco and the police warning, was hiding out in her hometown, terrified of being further implicated. The hearing was over much faster than I expected. Faced with the evidence of infidelity, emotional abuse, and lack of financial contribution that I presented, Ethan was completely defenseless. He kept his head down, not daring to argue, only mumbling his admission to all the accusations. The judge banged the gavel, officially granting the divorce between Olivia Morgan and Ethan Thompson regarding marital assets. Since Mr. Thompson could not prove any financial contribution, and the condo was purchased with Miss Morgan's premarital funds, the court awarded full ownership to Miss Morgan. Mr. Thompson was solely responsible for his personal debts. Holding the decree, I looked at Ethan one last time. He had slumped into his chair, his head in his hands, completely defeated. He had lost everything: his wife, his home, his job, his honor. Now, he was just a broke man, drowning in debt, shunned by society. I walked out of the courtroom and took a deep breath of the cold, clean, rainy air. I should have been happy, triumphant that the villain had been punished. But strangely, a wave of melancholy washed over me. I wasn't sad because I missed him, but for the 5 years of my youth I had wasted, for the sincere love I had given to the wrong person. I had won the legal battle, but perhaps in life there are no real winners when a family falls apart. Chloe gently patted my shoulder and handed me a tissue. Cry if you need to, then let it all go. Starting today, you are the free, beautiful, and successful Olivia Morgan. Life is long, and there are plenty of good men out there. Don't worry, you'll find someone worthy of you. I wiped away a tear that was about to fall and smiled at my best friend. Yes, I know. Thank you, Chloe. I couldn't have made it through this without you. Don't be a stranger, Chloe laughed, pulling me toward the parking lot. Come on, let's go celebrate your freedom. My treat. We walked out into the rain, the sound of my heels clicking cheerfully on the pavement. A dark, painful chapter had closed, but I believed that, ahead of me, a new, brighter chapter was waiting. After the divorce, I thought Brenda would have the decency to retreat, or at least feel some shame for what her son had done. But no, her delusions of grandeur and hollow pride were so deeply ingrained that she couldn't distinguish reality from fantasy. She still believed her son was a precious gem who had just hit a patch of bad luck, a victim of his ex-wife's schemes. To prove to the world that her son was still a catch, Brenda forced Ethan to go on a blind date right after he became unemployed and saddled with debt. She believed that if she could find him a new wife who was younger, prettier, and richer than me, all their troubles would vanish, and her family could once again hold their heads high. The blind date was at a chic cafe in a trendy neighborhood where a single cup of coffee cost as much as Brenda's weekly grocery budget. Chloe and I were already there, seated at a discreet corner table, watching the ridiculous charade unfold through the leaves of a decorative plant. Ethan sat hunched in his old, worn-out suit, his face haggard, his eyes darting around nervously like a thief. Across from him sat a young woman with heavy makeup and a very short skirt, her eyes constantly scanning the room. She was a match Brenda had found through a small-town matchmaker, supposedly the daughter of a wealthy businessman. But from the way she held her glass and eyed other people's designer bags, I knew exactly what kind of person she was. Brenda was talking non-stop, her booming voice overpowering the cafe's soft music. "Don't you worry, my dear. My Ethan is a young genius, a sales manager at a big corporation, making thousands of dollars a month. As for property, I have several houses. The luxury condo his ex-wife is living in is just one I was renting out. It's just that his ex-wife was a disrespectful shrew, so I told Ethan to just get rid of her." Hearing about multiple houses and a 6-figure salary, the young woman's eyes lit up like headlights. She feigned shyness, covering her mouth as she giggled. "Oh, really?" I could tell Mr. Thompson was a talented man. It's so rare to find a man who is both successful and devoted to his family these days. I don't really care about material things as long as he loves me. I almost burst out laughing. It was a match made in heaven. A con man meets a gold digger. Chloe nudged me and whispered, "See? They say a cornered dog will bite, but this family is cornered and still barking up a storm. Let's see if the old lady can keep up her lies when the police arrive." I took a sip of my tea. The bitter taste was followed by a sweet aftertaste. I looked at Ethan, who sat silently like a statue, sweat pouring down his face despite the cool air conditioning. He knew his situation better than anyone but didn't dare to defy his mother, forced to play the part of a wealthy heir while being completely broke. Brenda continued her tirade, disparaging me to elevate her son. That ex-wife of his came from a poor, uneducated family. I supported her for years, and she still turned around and bit me. Getting rid of a woman like that was a blessing for our family. I clenched my teacup, then relaxed my grip. Arguing with a madwoman would only diminish my own worth. I was here not to fight, but to witness the final act of a tragedy born of greed and ignorance. The cafe's atmosphere, thick with fake wealth and sweet lies, was abruptly shattered when the glass door was pushed open. 3 men in suits entered, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. Their arrival brought a chilling silence to the cafe. The officers walked directly to Ethan's table. Ethan's face went white, the glass in his hand trembling so violently that water spilled onto his sleeve. One of the men, a detective, stood before him, his voice clear and firm. "Are you Ethan Thompson? Please stand up." Ethan shakily stood up, nearly collapsing. Brenda, mid-sentence, was struck dumb, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stammered. Who are you? What are you doing to my son? He's a good man. Don't you dare frame him." The detective ignored her and pulled a warrant from his jacket. "The district attorney's office has issued a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Thompson. You are being charged with embezzlement and money laundering in connection with an international financial crimes ring." The metallic click of handcuffs snapping around Ethan's wrists echoed through the silent cafe. The sound was like a hammer blow, shattering all of Brenda's fantasies. She let out a piercing scream and lunged at the officers, trying to pull her son away, but was restrained by a female officer. "Let my son go, he's innocent." "He's a director. He has plenty of money. He doesn't need to steal." "It's his ex-wife. It's Olivia who framed him," Brenda shrieked, struggling like a madwoman. The blind date, witnessing the scene, turned pale. She grabbed her purse, shot up from her chair, and backed away as if he were contagious. "Oh my God, a fraud! A family of frauds! Thank God I didn't say yes," she muttered, before turning and fleeing the cafe without a second glance at the high-powered executive. Ethan was led past my table. For a brief moment, our eyes met. His gaze held no arrogance, only sheer terror and a deep, belated regret. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then looked down, shuffling his feet as he was escorted out. I watched his slumped figure, my heart unmoved. This was the price he had to pay for his unforgivable mistakes. The law may be lenient, but karma never misses. After her frantic outburst, Brenda collapsed onto the floor, her hair disheveled, her eyes vacant, staring after the police car as its siren faded into the distance. "It's over," she mumbled to herself. "It's all over. Where are the big houses? Where is my director's son?" Chloe patted my shoulder gently. "Let's go, Olivia. This act is finished, but there's one more thing you need to do to close this chapter for good." I nodded and stood up, smoothing my jacket. "That's right. Ethan is going to prison, but his family's debt to me remains. I am not a charity, and I don't forgive debts owed by the ungrateful. It's time for a final, clean accounting." The news of Ethan's arrest for embezzlement and money laundering spread like wildfire, incinerating the last shred of honor the Thompson family had. The relatives who had once fawned over them and mocked me now turned on them, cursing Brenda and her son to distance themselves, but I paid no mind to the gossip. My goal was to reclaim what was mine, the money I had foolishly sacrificed for that ungrateful family. I called the Thompson family patriarch, Ethan's great-uncle, a respected elder who valued honor above all else. He was the only one in the family I still held some respect for. When I explained my desire for a family meeting to settle all debts, he was silent for a long moment before sighing and agreeing. The meeting was held at the family's ancestral home downstate. The atmosphere was somber and tense. Brenda sat huddled in a corner, her face swollen from crying, looking 10 years older. I placed a thick file on the heavy wooden table and calmly opened it before the elders. "Esteemed elders," I began, my voice even and clear but carrying immense weight. I am here today not to complain or seek pity. I am here to demand justice. I turned to a handwritten IOU from Brenda, a note she had begged me to co-sign for a loan, supposedly for a nephew's business, but which she had actually used for high-interest lending. This is a debt of $8,000 that Mrs. Brenda Thompson borrowed from me 2 years ago. To this day, I have not received a single penny of the principal or interest. She claims she has no money, but I happen to know she recently sold a piece of land to try and bail out her daughter, an attempt that failed. Brenda flinched, looking at me with hatred but not daring to speak in front of the elders. I continued, turning to another page, a summary of expenses for Tiffany. And this is a total of $10,000, which includes her college tuition, a scooter, a phone, and living expenses that I provided for 4 years. She is a grown woman, capable of working, yet she used her sister-in-law's money for a lavish lifestyle, and now she is a convicted felon. This family has a responsibility to repay me. The patriarch picked up the papers, his old hands trembling. He closed his eyes and shook his head in pain. For a man who prized his family's honor, having such disgraceful children was an unbearable shame. And as for Cousin Tiffany, I said, turning to the young woman cowering in the corner, you have repeatedly sent me insulting messages and spread false rumors to tarnish my name. I'm not asking for money from you today, but I demand that this family take appropriate disciplinary action. The patriarch slammed his hand on the table, his roar startling everyone. A disgrace to this family. A complete disgrace. Ethan, Tiffany, and you too, Brenda. You have sullied the name of the Thompson family. He turned to Brenda, his eyes blazing with anger. Brenda, you will find a way to pay back every cent you owe Olivia immediately. I don't care if you have to sell your house, sell more land, or borrow money. This family will not be known as deadbeats who cheat their daughter-in-law. And as for you, Tiffany, you are forbidden from ever stepping foot in this house again. This family has no place for a disrespectful child like you. Brenda trembled, falling to her knees to beg for mercy, but the patriarch waved his hand dismissively and walked away. His word was law. 3 days later, the patriarch himself came to the city, bringing with him the last remnants of the Thompson family's honor to settle the debt. We met at a quiet tea house. He looked much older, his hair now completely white. He placed a bundle wrapped in old newspaper on the table, filled with stacks of cash of various denominations. This is $18,000, he said, his voice raspy. It covers the full debt from Brenda and Tiffany. Brenda had to sell the last piece of family land to get it. This money is her blood, sweat, and tears, the last of what she had. But I made her pay it. A debt is a debt. I looked at the money, feeling neither greed nor satisfaction. I knew what it must have taken for a shattered family to gather this sum, but I accepted it. It was what I had earned, and it was the justice I deserved. The patriarch then took a bank card from his pocket. And this is $20,000 from me and the other uncles. We know that no amount of money can undo the pain that Ethan and his mother caused you. Please accept this as a small token from the Thompson family to ease our conscience. I looked at the card, then into the old man's tear-filled eyes. I understood his gesture, his shame, but I shook my head and gently pushed the card back toward him. Sir, the $18,000 is money I earned, and I will take it back. But this $20,000, I cannot accept. I am not seeking to get rich from anyone's pity or remorse. I want to walk away from this marriage with my head held high, owing no one and being owed nothing. The patriarch stared at me, his eyes filled with respect and a profound sense of regret. You are right, he said, his voice slow. You are a woman of principle. Ethan was truly a blind fool to lose a wife like you. I smiled, a smile of genuine relief. I took the bundle of cash. It felt heavy in my hands, but my heart was light. I stood up and bowed my head to him one last time. Please take care of yourself, sir. From this day forward, there are no more debts between me and the Thompson family. The ties are cut. The debts are settled. I walked out of the tea house into the late afternoon sun. The city sounds, the traffic, the chatter seemed to welcome me back to life. I had severed the final ties, cast off the bitterness. The accounts were settled. It was the best way to close the past and open a new chapter of my life, a life of freedom and pride. After my meeting with the patriarch, I went home and fell ill. A high fever lasted for 3 days and nights, as if my body, finally free from the long, arduous battle, was allowing itself to collapse. In my delirium, I was haunted by fragmented dreams. Bustling in that cramped holiday kitchen, Ethan laughing with his online flame, Brenda's face contorted with rage. "Olivia, honey, you're awake. Here, have some soup." A gentle, familiar voice pulled me from the nightmare. I opened my eyes to see my mother's worried face. Her eyes were dark with sleeplessness as she gently wiped the sweat from my brow. I struggled to sit up, and she spoon-fed me hot chicken noodle soup. "Eat up, sweetie," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I made it just the way you like." "My poor girl, you've gotten so thin." I swallowed a spoonful of the hot, savory soup. Suddenly, tears streamed down my face. For 5 years, I had cooked countless meals for my husband's family, never once receiving a thank you, let alone being cared for when I was sick. I hugged my mother tightly, crying like a child. "I'm sorry, Mom. I made you and Dad worry." She patted my back, her own voice choked with tears. "Don't be silly. You're our child, no matter what. You're home now. No one can hurt you anymore." After I recovered, Chloe insisted I take a vacation. She was right. I needed time and space to heal. We chose a small cabin deep in the mountains of Colorado, surrounded by majestic peaks and pine forests. There were no city noises, no family drama. Every morning, I woke to watch the sunrise, breathing in the crisp, clean air. I spent my days hiking, reading by the fireplace, or simply meditating to the sound of the wind in the trees. I realized life held so much beauty I had missed while chasing an illusion. Happiness wasn't having a perfect husband in the eyes of society. It was having a peaceful soul. My vacation ended, and I returned to the city with renewed energy. But the storm had not yet fully passed. It began with strange text messages late at night, not from Brenda or Ethan, but from anonymous numbers, with threats reeking of gangsterism. "You think sending Ethan to prison is the end of it? You messed with our business. Watch your step, little lady, or you might have an accident." I read the messages, a chill running down my spine. I guessed they were part of the money laundering ring I had exposed. Ethan's arrest had disrupted their operations, and now they were targeting me. The next morning, I found my car in the parking garage vandalized. Red paint was splattered across the hood, and all 4 tires were slashed. Scrawled on the windshield in red paint was a message. First warning. The elderly security guard told me the camera in that section had mysteriously malfunctioned the night before. I was scared, but my reason told me that backing down now would only embolden them. I didn't call a tow truck. I called the lead detective on Ethan's case. "Detective Miller, this is Olivia Morgan," I said, my voice shaking slightly but firm. "I'm being threatened, and my property has been vandalized. I believe it's connected to Ethan Thompson's money laundering case. I want to file a report and am willing to cooperate to bring this entire group down." Under the discreet protection of undercover officers, I went about my life as usual, acting as bait. 2 days later, while driving home on a quiet road, a group of masked men on motorcycles surrounded my car, forcing me to the side. They brandished baseball bats, smashing them against my windows. But they didn't know that the large van driving behind me was not a delivery truck, but a disguised SWAT team vehicle. The moment they raised their bats, officers swarmed them, taking the entire group down in a swift, coordinated takedown. With the criminal ring dismantled, Ethan in prison, and Tiffany on probation, the Thompson family was in ruins. Brenda, having sold everything to pay debts, was now broke and being hounded by loan sharks. In her twisted mind, I was the cause of all her suffering. One Monday morning, as I pulled up to my office building, a crowd was gathered outside. In the center was Brenda, dressed in rags, her hair a mess, sitting on the pavement. She held a banner made from a white sheet, with words scrawled in a thick red liquid that looked like blood. It read, "Evil daughter-in-law Olivia Morgan jailed husband, stole family fortune. Heaven will not forgive." She wailed and screamed my name, telling her fabricated story to anyone who would listen, while a swarm of YouTubers and TikTokers filmed her, live streaming the drama with clickbait titles. I sat in my car, watching the chaos with a mixture of disgust and pity. She had debased herself to this level, all for the sake of a blind, pointless revenge. I calmly backed up my car and drove down to the private employee entrance in the garage. Fighting with a fool in public was a losing game. The incident exploded online. Hateful comments flooded the internet. At work, colleagues started looking at me differently. That afternoon, my boss called me in. He knew the truth but was under pressure. "Olivia, you have 3 days to resolve this, or I'm afraid your position here will become untenable," he said regretfully. I understood. In the world of high finance, reputation is everything. I promised him I would clear my name and the company's in 2 days. I went straight to Chloe's office. We had a plan. For 2 days, I remained silent while the online mob raged. I quietly hired a private investigator and gathered security footage of Brenda accepting money from YouTubers to embellish her performance. I compiled every legal document: Ethan's conviction, Brenda's IOUs, evidence of his abuse. The next day, I held a press conference. I invited only reputable legal journalists. I appeared in a crisp white suit, a symbol of my innocence and a declaration of war against the slander. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady. For 2 days, I remained silent, not because I was guilty, but because I needed time to gather evidence to speak with you today using facts and the law, not emotion. Behind me, a large screen displayed the court documents, the security footage of Brenda faking her grief, and the financial records proving I had supported her family for years. The room was stunned into silence. I concluded my statement by announcing my lawsuit against Brenda Thompson for defamation and my intent to pursue legal action against any individual or media outlet that had spread the false information. The press conference was a resounding success, instantly turning the tide of public opinion. As I predicted, cornered and desperate, Brenda snapped. That evening, as I was leaving my empty office late, she ambushed me in the parking garage. She lunged at me from behind a concrete pillar, a small, sharp paring knife in her hand, screaming that she would kill me. Thanks to the self-defense classes I had taken, I reacted instantly. I used my heavy leather briefcase to block the attack. The knife sliced through the leather and grazed my arm, drawing blood. The pain was sharp, but adrenaline kept me focused. She lunged again, but the sound of sirens and running footsteps echoed through the garage. Security, alerted by my previous warnings, tackled her from behind. The knife clattered to the ground. She was pinned to the grimy concrete, still screaming curses at me, a pathetic and terrifying sight. The police arrived and took her away. She would be charged with aggravated assault. I stood there, clutching my bleeding arm, realizing that this final drop of blood had truly ended the bitter saga. 3 months later, the final court cases concluded. Ethan Thompson was sentenced to 7 years in prison for embezzlement and money laundering. Brenda Thompson was found guilty of assault, but due to her age and apparent mental distress, she received a 2-year suspended sentence with 4 years of probation. I attended the sentencing, sitting in the back row like a detached observer. Ethan, bald and gaunt in his prison jumpsuit, looked like a ghost. As he was led away, he paused and looked at me, his mouth forming the word "sorry." I turned away. It was too late for apologies. Brenda was released, but she stood lost and alone on the courthouse steps, a woman with no home, no family, and no future. Tiffany, I heard, had married an abusive alcoholic to have a roof over her head, her life now a cycle of misery mirroring the one she had helped inflict on me. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunshine. The wicked had reaped what they had sown. I went home to the condo that was once a prison and began a complete purge. I hired a crew to gut the place. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every reminder of Ethan and his family was thrown out. I repainted the walls from a cold gray to a warm, cheerful cream. I filled the space with light, art, and plants. I turned the balcony where Ethan used to smoke into a small garden sanctuary. And in the center of the living room, I placed a state-of-the-art massage chair, a luxury I had once dreamed of but was denied. This was no longer their house, it was my home. To celebrate, I hosted a small housewarming party, not with 30 strangers, but with my parents, Chloe, and a few close friends. My father, his eyes misty, raised a glass. "My daughter," he said, "we are so proud. But more important than any of this is that you have found your smile again." A year passed. It was Thanksgiving evening again. The house was filled with the warm scent of baking and the sound of my parents' laughter as we prepared the meal together. The doorbell rang. It was a letter from the prison, from Ethan. In his shaky handwriting, he wrote of his remorse and begged me to wait for him, to give him a second chance. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, just a profound emptiness where love and hate used to be. That man was a stranger to me now. I found a recent photo of myself, smiling brightly with my parents, a festive dinner spread before us. After the holiday, I would mail it to him with no message. The picture itself was the only answer he needed. I was happy. I was free. On the first morning of the new year, I stood on my balcony, sipping hot tea and watching the city wake up. My phone buzzed with holiday greetings. One was from Leo. "Happy New Year, strong girl. This year, remember, it's okay to lean on someone if you get tired." I smiled and sent back a simple heart emoji. The future was unwritten. I might find love again, or I might continue to cherish my splendid solitude. But one thing was certain. I, Olivia Morgan, would never again let anyone else write my story for me. I was the author of my own life, a life that was finally, truly my own.